Yes, I'm going to welcome you. Well, I'll be welcoming you 3 or 4 times. But what I want to do is officially start out with the Rachel Carson Jubilee, woohoo, and Civic Colloquium, where we figure out what to do, by presenting Rachel Carson's congressman, now Senator-elect Chris Van Hollen. And I'm just going to put him right up here.
Thank you very much, Bob, and it is great to be here with the Rachel Carson Council. Bob, thank you for all your leadership of the Council and so many other important causes over the years. Thank all of you for gathering here. I see many friends and neighbors, including the photographer right here, Ross. Let me thank you for celebrating the legacy of Rachel Carson, but really what this gathering is about is how we can learn from that legacy and how that legacy can inform all of us in terms of tackling the challenges ahead. And we know we have many. But first of all, I would like to say that we Marylanders do take a lot of pride in the fact that Rachel Carson lived in Silver Spring. Her home is on the National Historic Registry. For those of you who haven't been there, we encourage you to visit. And of course, she was living in Silver Spring when she became very concerned about the insecticide experiments going on in Patuxent, Maryland, being carried on by the U.S. government. And she began to look and observe the impacts of those experiments on animal life and asked herself the question, if this is what's happening to animals, and that's bad in its own way, but what also could happen to humans. And I think all of you know one of the really important lessons that came out of the Rachel Carson story is that at first her work was very much maligned. She was criticized. People said that she was making stuff up, that there was no truth to this, but she knew that she had science and truth on her side, and she spoke truth to power, and she helped launch a movement by painting a portrait in very vivid terms for people about what the impact of these pesticides would be. And of course, she wrote her book, Silent Spring, about a town that woke up one day and there was no songs, no bird songs. And by painting that picture, connecting the science to people's experiences, she was able to paint a picture that I think helped launch a movement and transform the country and really push the environmental movement. As Bob has pointed out in his very good book, and I think one of the last times I was with you was for the book launch, and if you haven't read, he didn't ask me to promote his book, but it is a very good book, Rachel Carson and Her Sisters. Rachel Carson said that she was also inspired by the activists that came before her, that she didn't just sort of launch a movement all by herself. She took solace and comfort and strength from the fact that others had carried this torch before. And of course, she also helped launch a generation of environmental activists that continues to this day. In fact, I do want to take this moment to remember a good friend of mine, a great leader in the environmental movement, Leon Billings. I don't know how many of you had the chance to work with Leon Billings. He was a state legislator in his later career, but he worked for Ed Muskie in the Senate, on the Senate committee, and was very involved in writing the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act, and he passed away recently, and I did want to remember him here today. But if you look at what Rachel Carson helped launch in terms of the movement and the incredible impact it had in terms of passing legislation, including recently, you see sort of the latest iteration of her work on toxic substances in the reauthorization of TSCA. And we all need to make sure that we enforce that law going forward, but that has a direct lineage, of course, to her work. Now, bringing us to today, I think even with her great visionary powers and great ability to see ahead, I'm not sure she would quite forecast the particular political circumstances we find ourselves in today. with a president-elect who has said that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese, that the chief of staff has also said essentially that climate science is junk science, never mind that 99% of scientists in the world have concluded that there's a direct human impact and cause in terms of climate change, and that the person who's been put in charge of the the team with respect to EPA would be somebody who is a direct enemy of the work of EPA. So I'm not telling any of you anything that's new. We've got our work cut out for us as we head into the new year. Much of the good work that President Obama did in climate change, for example, the Paris Agreement, was legislation, were efforts that he was able to put into effect through executive order and international agreements. And while I guess there was some good news from the interview that the president-elect did with the New York Times, suggesting maybe there was some merit to some of these things, I think all of us know that we've got an incoming administration that is really populated by people who are on the other side of these issues. So what does Rachel Carson tell us about how we move forward? And let me apologize, let me turn this off. What we need to do is translate what we know to be the science in a way that people can see is directly impacting their daily lives. Climate change, for example, is not something in the future. You know, we used to talk about it as the impending impact of climate change. Climate change is here now. It's impacting every American community. And just like Rachel Carson painted that picture of a town that woke up one day without any song, without any birds, we need to connect what's happening in communities around the country to climate change. So flooding, hurricanes, droughts, things that are impacting people's farming and agriculture. We have to connect that directly to carbon pollution. All sorts of other impacts down the road of spread of disease, asthma, all sorts of other things that are going to be impacted now by the climate change. I apologize. First of all, I want to say to all Marylanders who are here, thank you for your support in the election. The result is, in addition to a lot of work on the environmental side, you know, we also have to, you know, make people understand that for all of us who care, and this is not a partisan statement, this is just a statement of fact with respect to the environment. For everybody who cares about the environment right now, protecting the currently 48 votes and maybe a couple others in the United States Senate who care about protecting the environment is something we've really got to focus on. And so that's why my phone's ringing, because after I talk to all of you, I'm going to be talking to a group that is focused on making sure that in the Senate we don't lose our ability to block bad stuff. So let me just weave that back into what I was talking about here. When we talk about these issues, we sometimes talk about them abstractly. And I think that the lesson, as I was saying with respect to Rachel Carson, is she made the impact of pesticides and, you know, insecticides real in people's minds and imagination. She connected it with their experience. And we need to do a better job of that. You know, right now, climate change, for example, is costing people, not just in terms of the toll, the human toll from hurricanes and extreme weather events, it's costing them in their insurance rates right now. And I often say to people, if you don't believe the scientists, you should believe the actuaries, because the actuaries right now are increasing the amount of money they are paying. This is a bread and butter issue. This is a kitchen table issue. You are paying more right now because of climate change, and you're going to be paying more and more in the future. And then the other part of it is, in addition to making clear that there's a huge cost to them of doing nothing, we also have to point out there's a great opportunity for people in doing something about it. I mean, a clean energy future, investing in renewables and energy efficiency, is a way to generate good paying jobs, homegrown jobs here in the United States. And I think we all know that people throughout this country are in many places going through a lot of economic pain. And what the opponents of climate change are telling people is, first of all, it doesn't exist, so don't worry about it, climate change. But to the extent that we have to do something about it, it's going to cost them, it's going to hurt them. When in fact, doing nothing is what is costing them. And doing something by investing in a clean energy future can help put more people to work in good paying jobs. And we've got to make that connection clear in people's lives and at the local level and community levels around the country. So thank you all for gathering in memory of Rachel Carson, but really to use that memory of her speaking truth to power and really launching a movement to keep the faith, because all the polls show that the American public, despite the election results, when it comes to these issues, the public is on our side. The public is way ahead of people. But it's those other issues that are also on the mind of the American public, those pocketbook issues, and what's happening to them in their daily lives in terms of the jobs and their income and the costs they're paying are also obviously heavy on their minds, and in many cases, in my view, were part of what explains this election result. And we need to be addressing climate change and environmental challenges in a way that connects back to people's direct experiences, and that's what Rachel Carson was able to do. Now, let me just say in parting that on this, and the reason this is obviously important is the Senate, the United States Senate right now, and those of us who see ourselves as protectors of the environment with all of you in the United States Senate are really the last line of defense between administration policies that want to totally turn back the clock on the progress we've made, including rolling back some of the President Obama's measures, including defunding the EPA and enforcement. And so we're going to need all of you as allies to make sure that we're able to hold the ground. As all of you know, in the Senate, what makes the Senate different than the House is the ability to filibuster. It is a protection for the minority party, and it's really important that we have in place enough senators who are able to block bad things from happening, both over the next 2 years and beyond. And so that is going to be a real battleground with this administration if they follow through on a lot of the things they're saying they're going to do right now, and I have no reason to believe they won't try to do what they're saying they're going to do. So thank you for being part of the team that's going to carry on the legacy of Rachel Carson as we go into the future. And I'm grateful for all of you being here, and whether you're from Maryland or not, we invite you all to come to Rachel Carson's home in Silver Spring. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you.
I'm going to invest in real estate in Maryland. You all are welcome to move in and have Chris as your senator. Thank you so much. I just want to say we didn't have time as we were starting to lay out. I think you all know Chris Van Hollen and his record. I would just add that he has struggled from the beginning in the state legislature in Maryland, in the Congress, and now in the Senate. He also, as we talk about Rachel's legacy, is someone who has a sophisticated and very interesting and expert view of national security and foreign policy issues. And as we talk here today, and as you hear from people and give your thoughts, what we hope to do is unify the team, the movement, you, Chris and others into one force. And Rachel Carson believed in far more than just pesticides and insecticides. And that will be one of our themes. Chris already said what her legacy is, so I'm just going to stop.